The Statutes and Rules of Bologna, from 1248. It consists of a collection of 16 pages of parchment, which is officially dated the 8th day of August 1248, the year of its application in the city of Bologna. In the 13th century, Bologna presented, with its 50,000 inhabitants, a thriving economy which generously profited its bourgeois, rich merchants or thrifty traders. The city became famous for its luxurious palaces and towers, taller or shorter, true and perpendicular or more or less inclined. We do not know today if they were used as residences or fortresses. This high level of construction created a constant demand for masons and carpenters, mostly coming from other cities. One historical detail: in 1256, Bologna promulgated the Legge del Paradiso or Act of Heaven, suppressing within the entire extent of its municipal limits feudal serfdom, and freeing slaves. In France and elsewhere, during the 13th century, France was ruled by King Philip Augustus (1165–1223), Saint Louis (1214–1270), and Philip the Fair (1268–1314). The Catholic Crusade against the Albigensians (1208–1229) was mounted, and some 24 cathedrals were built or at least started, including those of Rouen (1204), Reims (1211), Toul (1221), Tours (1236), and Albi (1282). France had some 20 million inhabitants. In Spain, Ferdinand III, King of Castile and Leon (1199–1252), conquered the Muslim kingdoms of Andalusia, while the other sovereigns of Europe led 5 different crusades against the infidels of the East. The document, containing some 61 articles, the Bologna Statutes, open with an invocation to the Holy Trinity and an oath of allegiance to the Pietà Bolognese. They continue with an obligation of submission to the orders of the Bolia, the head of a building site. They set out, in detail, the duties, as well as the fines, of all members, for any offences committed. Finally, they enumerate different rules about masters of the structure that we will not mention here. Modern transcription from Latin. The text. Statutes and Rules of the Master Masons and Carpenters. These are the statutes and rules of the Society of the Master Masons and Carpenters, made in honor of God, our Lord Jesus Christ, the Blessed Virgin Mary and all saints, and in honor of the good fortune of the town of Bologna and the trade union of said masters, with respect and in honor of the potentate, potestates, and captain of Bologna, who governs or will govern in future, and with respect to the statutes and rules of the Society of Bologna, in existence or to be made. And may all following statutes from now on be applied, to be from today, the year 1248, the 6th indiction, the 8th day of August. 1. Oath of the above-mentioned masters. I, Master Carpenter and Mason, who is or will belong to the union of said masters, I swear in honor of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Blessed Virgin Mary, and all saints, and in honor of the potentate and captain, who is now in charge or who will be in charge in future, and in honor of the good fortune of the town of Bologna and all those who will govern the town of Bologna, that I will conform myself and obey all and each of the orders given to me by the Bolia foreman and the officers of the trade union of masters, carpenters and masons, or any of them, in honor and the good fortune of the union, and to preserve and maintain the union and the members of the union in good condition, and to guard and maintain the statutes and rules of the union as they are now or will be imposed in future, with respect to all statutes and rules of the town of Bologna, as it is stated that I will be bound by my oath to adhere to them at my entry to the union, and that I will be disengaged after my departure. And if I will be called to the board of the union, I will not refuse, but I will accept the command, and I will manage with care and will lead and preserve the union and the members of the union. And I will distribute the charges with equity between the members of the union according to that which I and the board of masters will judge convenient. And I will give and cause to give fines, prescribed by the statutes of the union, and when statutory rules are missing, I would impose sanctions according to the will of the board. And all sanctions I would impose for any act, whatever it may be, I will have noted down in a book and I will hand and give it to the Bologna of the Union. And the sanctions, the funds, and wages of the Union, the statutes, and all that is in his possession with regard to the funds of the Union and all writings and correspondence referring to the Union, the Bologna shall remit at the moment the statutes prescribe and give to the Bologna, who will succeed him in the assembly of the Union, under penalty of a fine of 20 Bologna sous. And the accountants are bound to inspect them and pronounce a sanction against the failing Bologna unless they are prevented by a unanimous decision of the Board of the Union or by majority of votes, or due to a fair reason. And if I would impose, as an officer, a contribution for the expenses of the Union, I will first explain the reason to the Board, and it will be imposed as the Board will decide unanimously or by majority of votes. 2. About insulting words against the officers or the Bologna. We enact an order, that if someone of the Union says insulting words to the officers or the Bologna, or against the notary, or if he accuses them of lies, he will be punished with 10 Bologna sous. 3. About the penalties to those who did not come, if they were summoned to a determined place. We enact an order, that if someone is summoned by the officers, the Bologna or the nuncio to come to a place where the Union assembles, he shall have to come each time and as often as he will be summoned or ordered, on penalty of a fine of 6 deniers. And even if it is not required, each will be obliged to come the one but last Sunday of the month, without summons, carefully, without lie or deceit. That he is not only bound to it by his oath, but that he will risk the above penalty, even if he was not summoned to come. And if he comes to the place where the Union assembles and he leaves without permission of the Bologna or officers, he shall have to pay as a fine 12 Bologna deniers. Except in 2 cases, if he had a real hindrance, or if he was ill, or outside the town, or serving the town of Bologna, in which case you may, as in the other cases, mention his oath of obligatory service. And if he excuses himself falsely, he will be punished with 12 deniers. 4. About the election of officers and the Bologna and about the assemblies of the Union. We enact an order, that the Union of the Masters, Masons and Carpenters shall have 8 officers, and also 2 Bologna foremen, for example, for each trade of the Union. And they shall be equally divided over the quarters, and elected by lists in the assembly of the Union, so that in each quarter of the town there are 2 officers, for example, 1 of each trade. And that the officers, with the Bologna, stay in function for 6 months and no more. And that they shall call the Union to assemble and meet on the 2nd Sunday of the month, on penalty of a fine of 3 Bologna sous for each time they infringe, unless they should be withheld in a real force majeure. We add that the son of a master of the Union shall not and cannot be enlisted on the election lists if he is not at least 14 years old. And his father shall not have him enter the Union before that time, and the son shall not be received into the society before that time. And nobody shall take an apprentice, who is not at least 12 years old on penalty of a fine of 20 sous, and the contract thus made shall be without value. 5. That nobody can be elected, who is his son or father. We enact an order, that no officer or Bologna can be elected who is the brother or son of a voting member and that the vote given on this subject has no value. 6. That the masters obey the officers and Bologna. We enact an order, that if a member of the Union owes to another master a certain sum of money because of the trade, or if a master has some problem with another one because of the mentioned trade, then the masters having this quarrel have to obey the orders, which the officers or the masters mason and carpenter will impose for a settlement, on penalty of a fine of 10 Bologna sous. 7. How and in what manner the masters will be received in the Union, and how much they owe for their reception. We enact an order, that all masters, who wish to be received in the Union of the Masters, Masons and Carpenters shall pay to the Union 10 Bologna sous if they belong to the town or region of Bologna. And if they do not belong to the city or region of Bologna, they will pay 20 Bologna sous. and that the officers do realize all of their cares so that the masters not belonging to the union will be received obligatorily, and that this prescript is irrevocable, that nobody can in any manner be exempted unless at least 1/10 of the union decides, or unless he is a son of a master, who may be received into the union without payment. And if the Bologna or an officer supports the board or assembly of the union, the request of somebody wishing to spare the 10 or 20 Bologna sous to be given to the union, shall be fined with 10 Bologna sous. And if somebody of the union, having a seat in the assembly or the board, rises to say that somebody should be spared paying the 10 or 20 Bologna sous, he will be punished with 5 Bologna sous. And if a master has one or more sons, who know the trade of the mentioned masters, or who stayed during 2 years to learn the mentioned trades with his father, then this father shall have him received into the union without reception, paying himself to the union as is mentioned above, on penalty of a fine of 20 sous. And once this was paid, he still has to have him received into the union. And that the officers and the Bologna shall recover the sums due by those who have been received into the union, and the 4 deniers due for the masses, and the sanctions pronounced during their period of office. And that they shall have them take their oath in the union. And that the Bologna shall receive from the master, who has been received into the union, a valid guarantee, that within a month after the reception into the union, he will pay 10 sous, when he belongs to the town or region of Bologna, as said before, and when being from another region 20 Bologna sous. And if the Bologna and the officers do not recover the sums, then they have to pay to the union from their own pocket and give a sufficient compensation in money or wages, that the union be safeguarded, and this 8 days after the end of the delay of a month. And that the accountants have to control everything as said before, and, if this is not observed, to pronounce the sanctions mentioned by the statutes of the union. We add that whoever will be received into the union shall pay as a reception fee to the union 20 Bologna sous. We order this for those who, counting from today, will be employed in the future for learning the trade, and that this will be valid for the future from now on. 1254, 12th indiction, 8th day of March. As far as they are concerned, who will have no master for learning the trade, they will pay as a reception fee to the union 3 Bologna pounds. 8. That no master shall harm another master in his work. We enact and order, that no master mason and carpenter shall harm another master of the union of masters by accepting a work at a fixed price, after having assured him and promised formally, where he did receive this work in a different manner. Except that, if a master turned up before the work was formally promised and assured to him and he would ask a part, he then shall give him a part, if the other wishes so. But if an agreement was arrived at on the subject of the work, he is not obliged to give him a part if he does not wish this. And the one infringing has to pay as a fine 3 Bologna pounds for each time he infringes. And the officers have to impose the fines the statutes do prescribe within a month after the infringement becomes evident and clear to them, with regard to the statutes and rules of the Bologna community. And that the fines and penalties have to be delivered to the assembly of the union and remain there. 9. About the accounts the Bologna has to render and about the charge he has to fulfill. We enact and order that the Bologna of the Union of Masters shall render the account to the accountants within a month after ending his charge, unless he has the authorization from the new officers and the board of the Union, or that he failed due to a real case of force majeure. And that the Bologna shall answer for all entries and expenses received and paid during his period. And that all masters, who were received into the Union during his period, will be entered into a special book for this purpose, so that it is known whether they paid or not. And we order that all letters shall remain in the hands of the Bologna. And all letters referring to the Union and everything referring to the properties of the Union the Bologna shall give and transfer in writing to the Assembly of the Union to the following Bologna, so that the funds of the Union can in no manner become the object of fraud. And if the Bologna, with a fraudulent intention, left out certain of these prescriptions and did not comply with them, he shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous. And if he has kept funds of the union fraudulently with himself, he shall restitute the double to the union. Besides, the old Bologna shall, after leaving his charge, absolutely be obliged to give and transfer to the new Bologna all funds of the union, as well as letters relating to the union and the money of this society, on the first or the second Sunday of the month. And the new Bologna shall not extend this term for the old Bologna beyond 15 days. And that this prescription is irrevocable. And if one of the poliers would infringe, he shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous, to be paid to the society. 10. About the election of the accountants. We enact an order, that the accountants should be elected at the same time as the officers, and that there shall be 2 of them, for example, 1 for each trade. That the accountants shall inspect carefully the Bologna and the officers in function at the same time as the Bologna. And if they discover that the Bologna and the officers acted wrongly in the execution of their charge and that they committed fraud or deceit, they shall be condemned to restitute the double of the funds discovered of being withheld. Besides, they are condemned to restitute the equivalent of the pay they received. And that they are obliged to act thus and to inspect and condemn or give acquit within a month after the function of Bologna and officers ceased. And whether they condemn or give acquit they shall to do this in writing to the assembly of the union. And if the accountants infringe and do not observe these prescriptions, each of them shall be punished with 10 sous and they will be dismissed from their function, unless in a real case of force majeure, or when they received authorization from the officers and the board of the union. 11. About the transcription of the modifications by the board. In order to ever prevent any dispute between the members of the union, we enact and order that all changes of the union of the masters, masons and carpenters, related to the practice of the trade, shall be inserted in a special book, and that the Bologna and the officers shall have this done, on penalty of a fine of 5 Bologna sous. 12. The Bologna and the officers shall account for their charge only once and no more. We enact an order, that the Bologna and the officers of the union shall account only once for all expenses and receipts. And after they have once been controlled on the account they shall be no more called for a further account, unless they have been denounced or accused for having committed deceit or fraud, or for having illegally withheld money from the community and union. In which case, whoever may have accused them shall be heard. And those who have been controlled once shall not be controlled once more. And this rule applies for the past as well as for the future. 13. About the orders to be given by the officers and the Bologna. We enact an order, that all orders the officers or the Bologna, or one of them, may give with regard to money or other matters regarding the trade, that a master has to give to another master or has to have them given, these orders shall be given and ordered within 10 days. And if a master, to whom an order was given within 10 days, does not execute them, the officers and the Bologna shall then have to give, within 5 days after the 10 days, a mortgage to the creditor on the properties of his debtor, so that he shall be paid completely for that owed to him and his expenses. And that besides he shall be punished with 5 Bologna sous, if the officers judge this fair. And that this is irrevocable. And the one who owes money to another master or another person, who has been called upon or summoned by the officers or by the nuncio or clergyman of the union, and who did not appear before the officers or the Bologna, he shall be punished each time with 12 Bologna sous if he is traced. If he cannot be traced and was summoned for a second time, he shall be punished again for the same amount. 14. About a master hindering another master in his work. We enact an order, that, if a master has work at a fixed price, or per day, or in any other manner, and who wishes another master to have the work performed and cooperate with him, then the master who hindered the other master shall give him satisfaction as far as the price is concerned, unless he is not an officer or Bologna of the union, who gave this master work for the community of Bologna. And the one who infringes shall be punished as the officers will determine. 15. How much the masters being officers and the Bologna have to receive as their payment. We enact an order, that the officers and the Bologna, who are in future in function, shall receive as payment, each of them, 5 Bologna sous at the end of 6 months. and that the officers and the Bologna shall have to recover all penalties, sanctions, and contributions before they leave their charge, each in his own quarter. And if they did not recover them within the prescribed time, they shall have to pay from their own money to the Union as much in total as they did not recover. And that the officers and the Bologna shall be excluded from any charge during a year after they finished their charge. And we prescribe that the officers shall not receive wages, nor money, but that the Bologna receives integrally the total amount of wages and money, and before they leave their charge he shall pay the remuneration to the officers in charge from the funds of the Union. 16. About the candles to be made for the Union for the deceased. We enact and order that 2 candles shall be bought at the charge of the members of the Union, which shall be kept by the Bologna of the Union. And they shall be of 16 pounds of wax in total, and they shall be placed with the body when one of the masters dies. 17. All masters shall go to the deceased member of the Union, when they are summoned. We enact and order that if one of our members is called or summoned by the nuncio or by someone else in his stead to go to the funeral of one of the deceased members and he does not go, he shall pay as a fine 12 Bologna sous, unless he received an authorization or was impeded. And the body has to be carried by the members of the Union. And the nuncio of the Union has to receive from the Assembly of the Union 18 deniers for each deceased from the properties of the Union. And if the nuncio did not go and assemble the members of the Union, he shall pay a fine of 18 deniers to the Union. And the officers and the Bologna shall collect these sums. 18. The officers shall visit the sick members and give them support. We enact and order that if one of our members is sick, the officers have the duty to visit him when they learn about it, and to give him support and help. And if he dies and has nothing for the burial, the Union shall have him buried honorably at its own expense. And the Bologna shall pay expenses up to the amount of 10 Bologna sous and no more. 19. The clergyman travel at the expense of those who were sanctioned, and who neglect to supply wages. We enact and order that the officers and poliers, who will be in charge in the future, shall collect wages from a master as a remuneration, sanctions or other reasons, and charge him with all expenses they make recurring to the clergyman of the Bologna community or otherwise to collect them, so that the Union does not suffer. And the officers or the Bologna who made expenses to this end make them at their own account, unless they made these expenses according to the wish of the Union or the board. And if the one who has to pay money for this does not allow the nuncio of the Union to receive this wage from him, he shall be punished with 3 Bologna sous for each time he infringes. 20. About those who engage by contract. We enact and order that if someone engages himself with someone else by contract without staying and completing his time with his master or patron, he shall not be received before that term by any master of the Union, and that no assistance shall be given to him by any master who instructed him, or to whom he was denounced. And the one who infringes shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous. 21. Nobody shall go and receive the benediction more than once. We enact an order that nobody of the Union shall go more than once to receive the benediction. And the one who infringes shall be punished with 6 deniers for each infringement. 22. Nobody shall receive the benediction at one's own accord. We enact an order that if somebody receives the benediction at his own accord, he shall be punished with 6 Bologna deniers for each time he infringes. 23. Nobody is allowed to be beyond the horn of the altar. We enact an order that nobody should be allowed to be beyond the horn of the altar, turned to the church, on penalty of a fine of 3 deniers for each time he shall have infringed. 24. About the equitable share of the corvée, unpaid work, between the masters. We enact an order that if an officer orders a master of his region to go and work for the community, treating him equitably with the other masters, and that this one does not go, he shall be punished with 10 Bologna sous. And no master shall indicate another master mason or carpenter regarding work for the community of Bologna or anywhere else. And the one who infringes shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous. The officers, who will be in charge in future, shall make this indication by sharing equitably the masters per quarter, for example, the officers, who will be present in town, when the indication will take place. And if one officer does not treat a master equitably, committing deceit or fraud, when he deals with hostility against him, and this will be clear and evident, he shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous. Except when he is summoned by the potentate, or someone of his surrounding, with the aim to charge him with the work for the community of Bologna, he then can associate himself at his will without penalty or fine. 25. No one shall rise in an assembly of masters to give his opinion only on that which is proposed by the officers or the Bologna. We enact and order that nobody of the union shall rise to speak and give his opinion in an assembly only on what will be proposed by the officers or the Bologna. And the one who infringes shall be punished with 12 Bologna sous, and he shall pay this sum immediately or he shall give his wages. 26. One shall not make noise nor shout when someone is speaking, or makes a proposal in a meeting of the union of the mentioned masters. We enact and order that if someone makes noise in a meeting after an officer or officers or the Bologna or someone else made a proposal or took the word among the members, if he infringes he shall be punished with 3 deniers, which he shall pay immediately. And the officers and Bologna shall act that according to their oath. And if they do not respect it, they shall pay the equivalent to the union. 27. About the remuneration of the nuncio. We enact and order that the union shall have a nuncio, for example, one for 2 regions and another one for the other 2 regions. And they shall each receive 30 Bologna sous annually. And they shall bring candles if someone dies and look for a living for the Bologna. And they shall receive 1 denier for each task from those who will thus charge them. 28. How and in what manner the members shall gather for a deceased member, and at which place. We enact and order that if the deceased belongs to the district of the Styria Gate, the members shall gather at St. Gervais. And when the deceased belongs to the district of St. Proculus, the members will gather at St. Ambrosius. Besides, if the deceased belongs to the region of the Ravenna Gate, the members shall gather at St. Stephen. And if the deceased belongs to the region of the St. Peter Gate, the members shall gather at the St. Peter Church. And the clergymen shall say when they summon the members, to which region the deceased belonged. And if they do not tell, they shall be punished with 2 Bologna sous for each time they infringe. 29. Each member of the union shall pay annually 4 deniers for the masses. We enact and order that every member of the union shall pay each year 4 deniers for the masses, and the officers shall collect these sums. 30. One cannot take an apprentice for a period less than 4 years. We enact and order that no member of the union is allowed in any manner to take or keep an apprentice for less than 4 years and on condition of giving him a pair of bread loaves every week and a pair of capons at Christmas and 20 Bologna sous for the 5 years. And whoever infringes with regard of the time of 4 years, shall be punished with 3 Bologna pounds. And whoever infringes with regard to the 20 Bologna sous and the bread loaves and capons, shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous for each time he infringes with regard to each point. And we order that all acts shall from now on be laid down by the notary of the union in the presence of at least 2 officers, and they shall be copied in a book, which shall always be kept by the Bologna. And the one who infringes shall pay as a penalty 3 Bologna pounds. And this is irrevocable. 31. Everyone shall show to the officers the contract of apprenticeship within a year from the date when he received it. We enact and order that every member of the union shall within a year to be taken from the moment he has an apprentice show the certificate to the officers of the union. And when he infringes, he shall be punished with 5 Bologna sous for every time he infringes. 32. Nobody can employ someone who would not belong to the town or region of Bologna or who is a servant of someone. We enact and order that nobody of the union can keep and have any apprentice who would be a servant, or who comes from another county. The one who infringes shall be punished with 100 Bologna sous for each time he infringes. And we prescribe that if somebody of the union takes a servant as his wife, he shall pay as a penalty 10 Bologna pounds, being excluded from the union. And this is irrevocable. 33. The master shall have to receive apprentices into the union after 2 years. We enact an order that every master shall have his apprentice received into the union after he has stayed with him during 2 years and received from this apprentice a fair and sufficient guarantee regarding his entry into the union. The one who infringes shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous for each time he will infringe, at least, if he does not receive this guarantee. 34. Nobody of the union is allowed to work for someone who is in debt to a master. Very important. We enact an order that nobody of the union is allowed to work a day or on a court for someone who has to give or to pay money to a master because of his trade, once he has learned it, or that the case was denounced to him by this master, or the officers of the union. And the one who infringes shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous per master for each time he infringes, and that he shall pay the masters an indemnity for their work. And the officers shall impose a fine within 8 days after the case became evident and clear to them, and have the indemnity paid to the masters. 35. The union shall last for 10 years. Besides, we enact an order that the union shall last 10 years in total from now on, or any longer as is decided by the union or the majority by votes. 36. One shall not complain about the officers with the potentate or his tribunal. Besides, we enact an order that a master of the union cannot and shall not in any manner go to the potentate or his tribunal for complaining about the officers or one of them. And the one infringing shall pay as a fine 3 Bologna pounds for each time he infringes. And this is irrevocable. 37. Publication of the statutes. These statutes have been read and made public to the Assembly of the Union, assembled by the clergyman in the usual manner in the cemetery of the Church of St. Procule, in the year of the Lord 1248, 6th indiction, the 8th day of August, during the reign of the Lord Bonifatius de Carlo, potentate of Bologna. 38. The Bollier and the officers shall collect the contributions. We enact an order that the Bollier of the master's carpenter shall collect all contributions imposed, and sanctions attributed, and penalties given during their charge. And if he does not collect them, he shall pay the double amount as a penalty from his own pocket. And the officers shall each go in his region to collect these contributions, sanctions, and penalties. And the nuncio of the union shall go with the Bollier, and if they do not go, they shall be punished each with 5 Bologna sous for each time they infringe. 39. The nuncio of the union shall stay in function during 1 year. We enact an order that the nuncio of the union shall stay in function during 1 year, and that he shall receive as a remuneration 40 Bologna sous. 40. About the notary of the union. We enact an order that the officers and the Bollier shall employ a good notary for the union, and that he stays in function during 1 year. He has to enter the receipts of the Bollier and his expenses, and take care of all letters, alterations of the statutes of the union, and he shall receive as a remuneration 40 Bologna sous. 41. There shall be 2 books with the names of the master's carpenter. We enact an order that there shall be 2 books with the names of the master's carpenter, and that one of them is identical with the other. And the Bollier shall keep one, and another master shall keep the other. And if a master dies, he shall be erased from these books. 42. About the accounts to be given by the officers and Bollier. We enact an order that the officers and the Bollier shall give an account on every one but the last Sunday of the month by the altar of St. Peter. 43. About the set-up of the survey. We enact an order that the officers, who are in function in the future, shall each of them make a survey of the names of the master's carpenter, according to the content of the nominal list. And if the officers send out someone to serve the community of Bologna, he has to go there in turn, so that nobody shall be least, on penalty of a fine of 5 sous for each time he infringes. 44. Nobody shall say slander about the union. We enact an order that if any one of the union says offensive or insulting things about the union, he shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous each time. And this will be irrevocable. And the officers shall collect these sums. And if they do not collect them, they shall pay double from their own pocket. 45. The officers shall not be employed. We enact an order that the officers, who will be in function in the future, shall not be employed as officers during 1 full year after they finish their charge. Additions to the Statutes of the Masters. 46. The union shall meet separately. We enact an order that the union of the Masters Carpenter shall meet separately there, where the officers of this union will decide, and that the union of the Masters Masons shall meet separately there, where the officers of this union will decide, and this will happen in such manner that they will not assemble together. Except, if the officers of these unions decide to meet together, then they can meet. And the officers shall stay together to give account to all masters mason and carpenter, who wish to ask them about the accounts twice per month, this being 2 Sundays. 47. About the remuneration of the redactors of the statutes. Besides, we enact an order, the 4 officials for the statutes, who will be in function in the future, shall each receive 2 Bologna sous as a remuneration. 48. About the manufacture of candles. Besides, we enact that a candle of £1 shall be made at the expense of the union, to be burning during the masses of the union. 49. About the candles to be given each year to the Church of St. Peter. Besides, we enact an order that each year at the expense of the union 4 candles of £1 each will be given to the Church of St. Peter, Cathedral of Bologna, for the St. Peter festival in the month of June. And that the officers, who are in function in future, shall accomplish this on penalty of a fine of 5 Bologna sous for each of them. 50. That a master who fires an apprentice before the term cannot have another one. We enact an order that if a master of the Society of Masons fires one of his apprentices before the end of the term of 5 years, he cannot have another apprentice before the time of 5 years is fulfilled, on penalty of a fine of 40 Bologna sous. 51. About the purchase of a pall for the union. We enact an order that the polier and the officers, who will be in function at the new year, shall buy a good pall for the society at the expense of the society. This pall shall be carried on the members of the union, who have died, as well as members of the family of those of the union for whom it was bought, but not on anybody who does not belong to the union. 52. About the remuneration of the advisor of the elders. We enact an order that the advisor, provided to the elders of the Union of Masters Masons, shall be designated by the officers of this union. And he will have as a remuneration 5 Bologna sous at the expense of the union, of which the officers dispose, whether he will stay and be in function during 6 months. And if he stays 3 months, he shall only receive 2 sous and 6 deniers of Bologna. 53. The polier and the officers shall give accounts. We enact an order that the officers and the polier of the union in function in the future shall have to give account by each member of the Union of Masons to anybody, being no member of the union, who may ask for them. 54. No noise shall be made in a meeting. Besides, we enact an order that no noise nor quarrel shall be made in a meeting of the union. And if one infringes, he shall be punished with 20 Bologna sous. 55. The union has to meet at the Church of St. Peter. Besides, we enact an order that the union shall meet for all matters in the Church of St. Peter, or in the upper floor of the palace of the Lord Bishop. And the officers of the union shall give to the Church of St. Peter 4 candles of £1. And the Mass of the union shall be celebrated in that church. 56. There shall be 1 or more clergymen when someone of the union dies. Besides, we enact an order that when someone of the union dies, the officers of the union can have 1 or more clergymen for assembling the members with the body of the deceased and to remunerate them as is esteemed well, at the expense of the union. 57. About those who do not pay for the masses. Besides, we enact an order that, If someone does not pay 4 Bologna deniers for the masses in the time stated for this by the officers, he shall have to pay double to the nuncio, who goes to his living to collect this sum. 58. About the copies of the Statutes of the Union. Besides, we enact an order, that all statutes of the Union shall be copied again, and that where the offices mason and carpenter only masons are mentioned, the statutes of the Union of Masons shall be different from those of the Union of the Carpenters. And this will be irrevocable. 59. About the wages to be given to the nuncio of the Union. Besides, we enact an order, that if a member of the Union does not give wages to the clergyman of the Union, when this is asked for by the officers, one shall not work with such people, unless he conforms to the orders of the officers. 60. About the remuneration of the notary of the Union. Besides, we enact an order, that the notary of the Union shall have as a remuneration at the end of his 6 months' charge 20 Bologna sus no more. 61. About the remuneration of the controllers. Besides, we enact an order, that the controllers of the accounts shall receive as a remuneration 5 Bologna sus no more.